This is why nobody will be able to average 50 today, man. We're going to get right into it. We ain't going to waste no time with this one. I would like to see why.
If you're playing today, how many points would you average, you think?
All right, so 40, easy.
Mid-40s.
AI said 40.
I would average 45 points in today's game.
We estimate that Michael Jordan would have averaged 45 points per game.
Easily, he could have averaged 45 a game if he wanted to.
He'll be like 47, 48.
Yeah.
He probably averaged almost 50 a game.
Jordan averaged 50.
Today, how many points do you average?
Well, you got to understand with the rules of the day, with the offense not allowed to touch you, can't come in and put 3 or 4 guys around you when you don't have the ball. Probably about 65 or 70 might be a good thing, you know.
What? How many points could a player average in today's game?
The way the game is officiated and the pace of the game and the proliferation of threes.
If offense is more successful than ever, what kind of scoring numbers would the all-time greats put up now? Could someone really average 50 or even 60 points per game?
60 points OD though.
30, I could probably average 60 or 70.
Yeah, that's not happening. And we know it's not happening because of a fundamental concept that has governed basketball for a long, long time.
Would you like to tell Clyde how many points you would score if you played in the game today? How many points do you average?
We are asking the wrong question.
That's crazy.
When we want to know how dominant someone is, we shouldn't be asking how many points they would score. We should be asking how they change the scoreboard. If we sent Victor Wembanyama back to the 60s, his individual scoring is irrelevant compared to how much he would say improve his team's defense and thus his team's overall margin of victory and chances of winning. You ever notice when Magic Johnson comes up, we never ask how many points he would average in today's game. It's the same thing with Larry Bird, Oscar Robertson, Steve Nash, and even Nikola Jokic. You know, many of the best offensive players ever, which actually is kind of related to why no one would average 50 or 60 points today. And yes, I understand that these questions are about the greatest scorers to ever play, Wilt, Jordan, Kobe, and so on. But when people ask this question, they're really asking about dominance and equating it with points per game. And that's why no one can ever accurately answer the question. We've talked about era adjusting stats before, and those adjustments are about understanding the context of each era. Scoring 50 points sounded impossible back in 1999 when teams averaged 92 points per game. But when you learn that stars then only played about 75 possessions a night compared to Wilt's 130 possessions in a game, suddenly the scoring gap becomes clear. Obviously, pace isn't everything. We can adjust for minutes played, shooting percentages, and so on. But if we want to know how the great scorers ever would look today, there's a larger concept influencing all of these numbers. That concept actually creates an upper limit on individual scoring.
Players up front have gotten smaller.
You know, what we've seen in this era, you will see a Jordan probably shooting more threes too.
The way they play defense today where you can't hand check, you can't contest shots. You got to come on the side.
Now all of a sudden somebody blows on your wrist or hits your hand, that's a foul?
Yeah, none of that matters. What matters is this. Individual scoring numbers are governed by the defense. Look at it this way. All big scorers start with a foundation of skills that threatens defenses. They shoot, they penetrate, etc. Then, as we've discussed before, a player's teammates influence how often he scores and how efficient that scoring is.
Facts.
And the defense itself is the final piece of the pie. Their first job is to take away the other team's biggest scoring threat. That's why there's really no such thing as a 30-point per game scorer, because it depends on how many other scorers and creators are out there pulling on the defense. So unlike baseball, where pitchers basically face batters in a one-on-one situation, the best basketball scorers rarely get to play one-on-one. They usually play one-on-two or even one-on-five if there's enough pressure.
I think MJ probably would have averaged like 33 points per game, 34.
In the paint. Here's a list of the biggest scoring seasons in NBA history based on the estimated percentages of teams' points scored while on the floor. Notice 37? How rare it is to score 40% of your team's points. Dang. This is because the better you are at scoring, the more the defense can force you to pass. This is obvious, but it's a huge deal. If you are way more dangerous than your teammates, defenses give you way more attention.
No, that's facts.
So these ultra high scoring seasons usually happen when superstars are surrounded with weak offensive talent. They shoot more and pass less, which is actually why play finishers like lob threats and three-point shooters became such an asset over the years. On their own, they can't create good offense, but they can at least punish the defense for loading up on a great scorer. And this is why no NBA player has come close to scoring half his team's points. Because whatever era we're talking about, whatever rules are in place, defenses still act like an immune system designed to disarm the most dangerous offensive threat. A great isolation scorer will see double teams or at least one extra body protecting the basket. A great pick and roll player will be trapped to get the ball out of his hands. Even an off-ball scorer like Steph Curry sparked these 5-man rules designed to limit his outside shooting, just like in 1957, Kansas swarmed Wilt Chamberlain in the post so he couldn't catch it near the basket.
Dang.
Heck, there was even a game before the shot clock where the Pistons just held the ball so George Mikan couldn't even play offense.
That's crazy.
If we go back to our pyramid, the scoring skills are merely the foundation. The teammates then influence the expression of those skills. And finally, the defense creates an upper limit. They get to decide how much they're willing to give up to one person by throwing more and more resources at them. This upper limit isn't really a fixed number, but just about every defense will heavily curb a scoring threat that is disproportionately more effective than option B or C. Then it gets really fun. If a scorer ends up on a super team, the other options are so viable that the players naturally distribute the wealth, since it's actually harder to defend all these weapons at once from so many different places. 50-point games are awesome, don't get me wrong, but what's even more awesome is seeing one of these in person, and SeatGeek, who's been a great partner for us, can help make that happen. By the way, the hottest I've ever seen someone live was Paul Pierce in 2003 in the third quarter against Al Harrington, where he just gave him the business right in his grill. That was incredible. But of course, they have thousands of basketball games, baseball games, concerts, festivals, and more. And you know, I love the 1 to 10 scale and color coding that shows you how good the deal is. And the threshold is going to become more and more costly as the defense adjusts. That 50% mid-ranger is going to be a 40% shot against a double team. So you have to decide if you want to take that or trust a role player instead. By the way, this is why great passers are often the best offensive players. They're like a virus that the immune system can't quite corner, constantly shifting the pressure point the second there's a defensive opening. Now, you might be tempted to say, well, if Shaq or Wilt shot 80% from the free throw line, wouldn't they break this hard ceiling? With some basic math, we can see that Wilt would have averaged 53.6 points per game in 1962, which still only takes him up to about 43% of his team's points. Even if we look at smaller stretches where another teammate sat on the bench for a while, the craziest mega scoring stretch we have on record in the 21st century is 2019 James Harden without Chris Paul. And in those minutes, he averaged a ridiculous 45% of the Rockets' points, but that's still not approaching 50%. That was basically as close as we've ever seen to a true one-man offense, a player who was directly involved in an estimated 76% of his team's possessions, and he still couldn't score half the points. And I don't think this 50% number is arbitrary, because there's kind of a Goldilocks principle at work here for the defense.
I've never seen a season like that. With James Harden was that year? It was crazy. He was like, they put his sliders up on 2K or something.
They don't want to send too little help because the scorer will torch them. But they also don't want to send too much help because then other players will have warm-up shots. There's kind of a just the right amount to force superstars to toggle back and forth between shooting and passing. And since there are transition plays and loose ball fouls and other random events during a game, it's basically impossible to run every possession through a mega scorer, and thus we never really get half of 100%. We get something more like half of 80%, which is probably why it's extremely rare for a player to even score 40% of his team's points. To really hammer home how hard this is, look at the best individual scoring games in NBA history. Kobe Bryant's Dallas game, where he scored 62 points in 3 quarters. Yeah, that was 67% of his team's points. The 81-point game against Toronto, he scored 68% of his team's points while he was in the game. We don't have access to play-by-play data before 1997 to measure this exact share while a player was on the floor, but if we just look at an entire game, only 6 players have ever scored 60% of their team's points in a single night. Wilt and George Mikan played the entire game here, and you can see why Fort Wayne didn't want Mikan to have the ball back then. Even just scoring 50% of a team's overall points in a game is incredibly rare. It's happened about once every 500 games in league history, and from 1966 to 2000, it happened about once every 1,300 games. So we don't really need any era adjustments because this principle has been around for as long as the NBA's been around. Players get tired, actions become repetitive, teammates want to feel involved and touch the ball and score, and most importantly, defenses tighten the screws to create an upper limit on scoring in most cases. Today's teams average about 115 points per game. So someone who played the entire game with a 40% scoring share would average 46 points per night. But of course, star players don't play anywhere near 48 minutes now because of the increased demands on the body with all of the cutting and sprinting in the half court. Tyrese Maxey leads the league at 39 minutes per game. He's already a bit of an outlier this year, but let's be generous and give someone 40 minutes a night in today's NBA. And let's give him that mega scoring rate James Harden had without Chris Paul back in 2019. And when we do that, we get 43.4 points per game. 43 points per game using high-end numbers that basically no one has ever touched. And it would also require a team with almost zero offensive punch surrounding the star. Remember, Kobe, Michael, and many of the mega scoring seasons occurred because there weren't better options. Their scoring volume naturally dropped next to better and better talent. Even scoring 40% of the team's points on the number one scoring team in the league still only comes out to a point per minute. So it's very unlikely the high 30s are even happening once a player's supporting cast is decent. And yeah, it's fun to attach a number to our favorite players and think about how they would compare to today's era. I mean, if Jaylen Brown and Anthony Edwards are averaging 29 a game, then, what would Jordan average? Am I right? But
Jordan averaged 50.
Is not going to happen, at least not without completely abandoning any concept of winning or teamwork. And to me, the bigger takeaway in all this is that there's a more holistic force always present in basketball that transcends strategy and even the rules. That's one of the big reasons we spend so much time talking about all the non-scoring ways to impact the game on this channel. Or, in other words, it's always been a team sport. To support this channel, patreon.com.
Nah, I get what he's saying. What y'all think, man? Y'all think MJ would have averaged 50 points? I don't think so, man. He probably something close to that, though. But y'all let me know in the comments what y'all think back then players would average today.